Hi, and welcome to part 3 of Automating Active Directory with PowerShell tutorial series. In the last video, we went over how to get our employees from our CSV file, and we did that through some hash tables and a select object with some custom columns. And then we were able to create a function, and then we were able to also call the function. And in the function, it takes in our file path, our delimiter, and our sync field map, which we've also made in the last video. If you haven't watched that video, definitely give that video a watch before you go and watch this one. But if we just run what we had last week, we do see here that we just get our employees from our CSV file. So we get all that information here. So that's nice. So let's go ahead and let's start here. So we knew that in the first video, we kind of broke down our big problem of automating Active Directory into some sub problems. We haven't done all the sub problems just yet, but we knew that the first part was importing our employees from a CSV file, and we knew that the second part was loading in our employees that are already in Active Directory, load them in so we can actually see both data sources and compare them later on because we know that's our next step. So what we're going to want to do is right now in our Active Directory, if you followed the series, we don't really have any employees in here. We've created users, but these don't have any employee IDs. They aren't managed by your HR department. These are kind of like your break glass accounts. If HR's file was ever empty and it goes ahead and deletes those accounts, we'll have safeties to prevent that. But if for some reason every administrator in your company would get locked out, it is good to have these accounts that aren't really linked to um, a HR system and just have like a service account. Make sure that they are very well protected. Only a few people know the password, and make sure that they just have the rights that they do need. But you're definitely going to want to have one of those accounts just in case. So what we're going to need to do for this, because right now, if we actually try to get the employees, we don't have any employees in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create an employee with an employee ID so we can pull that back. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that in PowerShell. Since we are trying to automate everything through PowerShell, I'm going to show you how to create a user through PowerShell now. And later on, when we get to that step in the script, at least we'll have already seen the commandlet. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to type in New-ADUser. And then you could tab, you'll get the autocomplete there. And now we're going to have a lot of options. For this here, we are just going to put in a given name of test, a surname of test, and then we're going to put in the user principal name as test at test at jacked.ca here. And then we are going to go ahead and create the SAM account name as test. And we are going to put the office as test. And employee ID, we are going to put that as a dummy ID, which we do not have in the file here. And I know this because I am going to put 4 zeros and 4 zeros, so 8 zeros here. You could put anything you want. You could just put 1 0. I'm just going to stick to our 8-digit employee number. So all we got to do is run this here. Oh, and it's asking us for the name, which we're just going to put in test. And there we are. So that's created now. So if we go ahead and refresh our Active Directory, we're going to see a test user and it is disabled. but that is okay because we didn't assign it a password or anything like that, so it is disabled, but we do not need anything else. We just want to be able to pull employees back. All right, so the first thing that we've got to do, of course, is learn how to fetch an AD user. So what we're going to do is do a Get-ADUser, and we are going to get our user called test, and we are just going to specify the domain of jacked.ca here. And don't worry, guys, if you guys did not get that New-ADUser command, I'll be putting it in the description so you guys can just run it. I didn't mention a server or domain there. So as long as you guys are running it in a single domain, it'll work. If you guys do have like different servers that you guys or different domains that you guys might manage, just put in the proper domain there, and that'll work. I'm gonna do it pretty um, easy as if you do not have multiple ones. Like this is just going to be something you're going to be able to copy and paste. Maybe just change the user principal name to the proper domain name because that'll have, I'll just put it as test at domain.com. But you guys can put whatever your domain name is in there. So don't worry about if you guys didn't get that, that'll be in the description. So here we have our Get-ADUser test on jacked.ca here. So if we run that, we do see here that we do get it back. We get it back as enabled equals false, but we do get back a user. So that's awesome. So what we want to do is we can add dash properties star, and this way we can see all the properties on it. So we know what we really want is we really want all accounts that have an employee ID. If they don't have an employee ID, we really don't want them because we don't want to manage those automatically. We only want to manage the employees. So what we could do here to get all the users without specifying, because right now we're getting test because we're telling it to get us test. What we're going to want to do here is get ADUser, and we're going to want to use the filter parameter, and we're just going to put a star. You could put a star, or you could do square curly brackets, I should say. And then here we should be able to put employee ID like double quotes there, and we're going to put a star. And then we're going to put our server, which is going to be jacked.ca here. And there we go. So we got all of our employees. Now, what if you had just done a filter star without this here? If we would have just done get us every user in jacked.ca, well, we see that it brings back all of our users. And now if we actually pass this into the script and we do a compare, it's not going to find those users in the file, and it would delete them. So we don't want that. We don't want it to delete any users that aren't supposed to be managed. So that's why we use the curly braces and then the star value here. So now we know how to get all of our users out of Active Directory, but we still need to make sure that we are able to get this program basically by a function, so we can always call it later on. So let's go ahead and let's turn this into a function here. So we're going to turn this into a function, and we are going to turn this into get employees from AD. And we're going to add our curly brackets here, and we're going to do the commandlet binding. And we're going to add some parameters to it. Now, with this here, we can actually see a little bit better of what we're going to need as parameters. Now, I don't like providing just putting this hard coded in there, because if for some reason we don't want to use employee ID as your unique identifier, which I find it's definitely the easiest identifier if your HR department or your company doesn't use employee IDs for some reason. I mean, you can always concatenate some different fields. I would advise against using like a last name, first name, because people get married, people change their name. Um, and if they change their name or get married and then change their name, well, that's not going to be accurate anymore. And you're going to be performing actions on user accounts that you shouldn't be deleting. Because if we have a Jane Doe that changes her name to Jane Smith, well, it'll say, oh, Jane Doe is no longer in the file. We're going to delete her. But Jane Smith's in the file, so we're going to create her user. And if you have home drives or if you have Office 365 or other software that kind of links to that user account, all that data is going to be lost and you're going to have to do some extra work to bring that data back, put it into the new user account. What I would recommend if you don't have employee IDs is maybe use their birth date in combination with if you collect, you would obviously be collecting the social security number or social insurance number. What you could do is you could combine like the last 3 digits or the last 4 digits of the social security number or the social insurance number and concatenate with the date of birth. So you'd be able to do like, let's say today is June 1st, 2021. If someone was born on that date and then had the last four of their social security numbers, like 1234, I would do something like 2021 611234. This way, it's not super obvious of what even the data is. People probably wouldn't really know what it is, but you would be able to tell. Um, Now, it's not a foolproof plan, obviously, because we're only using the last four of the social. People can have the same last four, but then they would also have to have the same birth date, which is the same date, same month, same year. And the chances of that person, two people being born on the same day, having the same last four of their social, working at the same company, I would say is fairly small and probably negligible to be able to use. So that's just my little uh, tidbit there on how to use unique identifiers if you're not using employee ID. So what I'd like to do actually is create a variable here called unique ID, and we are going to put that equal to employee ID. And what this is going to do is let us change this into a unique ID. Now, if we do this here, we are going to see that it still works. So it lets us just put in our own unique identifier. So if for some reason yours is not employee ID, that is completely okay. You could pass in the unique ID property and it'll work. So what we're going to want to do here is we are going to want to first go ahead and actually pass in our sync field map, which is very important here because this is tells us exactly what values to go get. And then we're going to have another parameter here, which is going to be mandatory as well. And we're going to put this as a string. And this is going to be the domain because we need to be able to make this really flexible in case you ever change domain names or have multiple domains. And then our last parameter, as you could probably guess, is going to be our unique ID. So let's put that in here, and this is going to be a string again. This is going to be a unique ID. Perfect. So those are all of our values here, and then all we need to do is wrap this in our trusty try catch block. And then we're going to do our trusty write error message. And then we're going to specify the message. And then we are going to pass in our exception. Oops. Exception. If I can actually type it in properly here. There you go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do our try, which is going to be our Get-ADUser. We're going to do our filter. And we're going to do our unique ID like star. So this makes sure that it gets for what we specify on. So we're going to want to make sure that it is a field in Active Directory. Now, I would probably still use employee ID, just like I said, like if you want to make your own employee ID if they don't store one, um, just make one up with the concatenation of um, the social security number and date of birth, but you could use like an email field if they give you like the personal email. You can use that as well. That would work if they ever change their email though. Like you would have to change it. So I would definitely find out a way to create some sort of employee ID, whether it's your HR that creates one for you or you kind of create one for your users. So Get-ADUser filter, and then we're going to specify a server. And we are going to specify domain here. And then we are also then going to go ahead and click select properties, and we are going to do star. That'll get us all the, oh, sorry, that's not what we're going to want to do. We are going to want to just grab, for now, because we don't want to see all the properties, sync field map dot values. Now, this is actually just going to be an array of our mapped values. So this is actually going to be coming from down here. When we mapped our CSV file to AD properties, we are just grabbing the AD properties. So instead of having to rewrite the whole list, we're passing in our sync field map and we are taking that in. This way, if for some reason, like I said in the last video, if you ever change this, well, now it's automatically going to be changed in these two functions, and you're not going to have to rewrite it in multiple spots. And I mean, like, this is going to come in handy if you ever have to update this. Eventually, you would have used this in multiple spots. You're going to see later on in the video where we use the sync field map again. So you definitely don't want to be writing it multiple times. So there it is. There's our function. So let's make sure that it works here. So let's do get employees from AD, and let's pass in our sync field map and our unique ID, which is going to be just unique ID, and then our domain, which is going to be jacked.ca here. All right, so we actually have an error here. Oh, and that is because I did not run the function first. So let me just copy all of this here. Let's run it here. And we still have an error. One or more properties are invalid. So let's see why that is happening here. Oh, I see why. So I just passed in the values. I should have passed it in as an array to let it know that it's not a single value. Because right now, the way that I had it before, as you can see here, the parameter was department, employee ID, surname, physical office name, given name, and title. That's not really what I wanted to pass in. I want to pass it in as an array, so it has some commas there. So let's just put an @ symbol in front of it, and let's run it again. And there we are. So we've got our test back, and we get our employees back from Active Directory. So let me just shrink this down here just so you guys can see the code here. So this is our function. We take in the sync field map, our domain, and our unique ID. It'll get our AD user as long as it has an employee ID, as long as it's part of the correct domain, and it'll only take back the values that we can match to on the CSV file. And then we can run it here. So all we're going to do is we're going to put this at the bottom here so we can see what our script kind of looks like so far. So here we're declaring our sync field map, we're declaring our unique ID, and then we're going to be collecting our users and collecting our users from Active Directory. So that's pretty good so far. And I mean, we're still using some strings here, which we could easily fix that here. So let's go ahead and let's fix that before the end of the video here. So let's do CSV file path. Let's do C data employees. Let's do a delimiter here. And then let's do a domain. I always like to capitalize everything. And there you are. So here we go. And we have all of our values now. And now if we just do this, CSV file path, delimiter, and domain. And we do this. Now we can see it gets our test user and we get all of our users from our CSV file. So now we have both data points. We have our target data and we have our source data. Now the next step that we're going to do on the next video there is going to be comparing them. So we're going to take those two sources now that we have exactly what we want out of them, because we can see here, if we look at our user here, we do get all the data back. We also get um, some extra data back. So let's actually go ahead and let's actually just fix that here, because we could actually fix that. And what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to do a let's just make sure here. Actually, we're going to keep it as is because that's actually going to work. Yes, that should work. I'm not going to edit this out because I want you guys to see the thought process that I'm going through, just so you guys can really see what's going on here. So in the next video, we're going to go ahead and compare these two data sets together. And we're going to be comparing them on the unique ID, and we're going to be seeing which users need to be created, which users are already synced, and which users need to be deleted because they got fired or they quit. So I will see you on the next video. Please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell to know when the next video is coming out, and I will see you then.